First of all, leadership matters in a number of ways. You're going to see Art Acevedo later on today. I always hate Art following me because I never get a chance to get the last shot in. Okay? I see there's some TV cameras here, so I do expect Art to be here. So I better get the shot in right now. But I say leadership matters because to the point that Michael Scott made about leadership and deterrence and where do you sit and metrics that matters. I mean, there's people in Austin, Texas that will not drive drunk on the streets of Austin because they know where he stands on it, that former California Highway Patrol. I know members, lobbyists, that rent apartments close to the Capitol so they can walk. So they don't have the issue in terms of, because they know that nobody walks on a DWI in the city of Austin, plain and simple. And that matters. And I can tell you, if a trooper decides to knowingly release a drunk driver, and I find out about it, if Chief Gonzalez finds out about it, that trooper's gone. We don't need him, or her, for that matter. It's too important. And there's not a trooper out there, not a police officer at some point in time that had to do the worst deed of all, and that's go tell the mother and father of a child that they're just tragically ripped from them, and watch the horror, watch them faint, watch them cry. It's devastating. So there's no alibis, and thankfully there are organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, okay, that have really brought this situation forward, because enforcement was a joke at one point in time, because it didn't matter how many times we arrested them. They're out on the streets the next day. It never mattered. So there are some very positive things in recognizing this thing, but I'm going to look at it work backwards, because I'm not very smart like Michael Scott here. I've got to work backwards and look at what are we trying to achieve. From a Texas standpoint, every year we look at, okay, what are our greatest threats? And, well, Texas is not Wisconsin, it's not Rhode Island, and I like to make fun of Connecticut when I see the colonel from Connecticut. In fact, we've got a sergeant area in Texas that's larger than the state of Connecticut. Not to brag, it is big, but we do face the full spectrum of threats, and we have to worry about, especially with our mission with the Department of Public Safety, hurricanes and wildfires, floods, tornadoes. In fact, before I moved back to Texas, I didn't know hurricanes had 2 R's. It does, okay? And it does have an impact on lives, and it does floods. It's amazing what some devastating, catastrophic wildfires can do to people and people's lives. All these things are bad. And certainly terrorism, the specter of terrorism. We haven't lost one life since 9/11 on Texas soil. We prevented some plots, transnational gangs, a big problem in Texas. MS-13's moving in. We got Mexican Mafia, we got Barrio Azteca, we got all of them, Texas Syndicate, and we got Mexican cartels operating command and control elements in all our cities. So yeah, we have problems. In sex trafficking, and thanks to community-oriented policing, and sponsored by DOJ, we just recently got a grant for the sex trafficking, being able to recognize it on the highways and teach that to other patrol officers, because they're out there on that highway. They're looking for drunk drivers, they're looking for distracted drivers, they're looking for problems, they're being high visibility patrolled, but they're also looking for sex traffickers. And unfortunately, in the state of Texas, human trafficking has taken hold. And when people can make, hundreds of thousands of dollars off of a kid that they recruit up here under the guise that they're going to be a nanny, and turn them into prostitution, beat them, threaten them, that happens in Texas. So you have to be vigilant on that highway at all times. And we recognize that. But if you take the high-level threat, all those important things. When you start looking at it from a public safety standpoint, a highway safety standpoint, we lose 3,377 lives last year. If you think about that, we become so inured to that, no one gets upset about it. No one's storming, the Capitol. We've lost that many lives. And when you look at it from a Texas standpoint, certainly I like to be, good, I got a time, I know when to shut up. Good, that's very nice. When you look from a Texas standpoint, where are we? And we're very proud about being number one in so many things. We lead the nation in the number of fatalities. And having an alibi when you start dividing it by miles, million miles driven on a highway, puts us down to about 11th, but it still matters. So the solution, clearly is we have meetings we have people that care like this in this room, and a part of that caring is recognizing the importance of that education piece, Because even though we're in law enforcement, we've got to recognize the 3 E's as the general talked about. And I may add another E, enabling legislation, make it the 4 E's. But clearly, an education piece, we saw here today, I mean, can you get more courageous than Scott and his mother coming up here? That's education. That's meaningful education because it has impact on kids. And we got such a high rate of teen deaths. It's important to catch them when they're early and have that type of education. As it relates to engineering, hey, thank God for seatbelts. I mean, in my generation on the road in highway patrol, we thought nothing of driving up down the road 140 miles an hour. I can see a few guilty ones back there. No, we didn't wear seatbelts because we didn't want it to slow us down when we got out of the car. Yet the most dangerous thing we did was driving down that highway. We're mindful in DPS, with 59% of our officers we've lost on the highways. Not the firearms, but the crashes. So clearly, it's the most dangerous thing that people do. So if we look at it, we got the engineering part, we also got, TxDOT is so important as a partner. Because the solution may not be more patrols, the solution might be a new service. Or cutting down a tree that's obscuring in terms of your vision when you move out into an area, what we've seen in the past. Also, it's important to work with that district engineer on other things too. It may be the dadgum speed may be too fast for the conditions in that area. So there has to be a collaborative approach, not just the 3 E's, but all through that, and we have to work with our legislative partners and members and educate them on some things that we feel strongly about, because even if we reduce, just 1%, how many lives would we save in Texas? 5%. It's amazing that we can do it. And those lives are our people, our family, our friends. And yes, we're talking about impaired driving today, and certainly we should. And impaired drugs and alcohol. We're certainly mindful and worried about the Colorado experiment. I know my counterparts in Colorado and Washington are worried about it and recognize that the threat that comes from impairment from marijuana or tetrahydrocannabinol, it has an impact on the body, and we're concerned about those things. There's no value. More drunks and more drug people on the highway doesn't do anybody any good, clearly. But if you look at from the high level, 3,377 deaths, what's the state to do? Okay, we can look at those 3 areas, but let's get it down to a law enforcement standpoint. Well, as pointed out, you can't be everywhere all at the same time. And there's challenges and many demands that come upon law enforcement officers at the local and state level. So where do you focus? Well, we can go back to some of the things we've learned in studies over the years in terms about applying evidence. How about data? Data. And we found that whether we look at transnational gangs, cartels, it doesn't matter where you are, that you can have an impact, but you need to know where. And it's more important about where you patrol, and when you patrol sometimes, than how you patrol. Being there is important. So for our standpoint, the challenge for us is, well, how do we get that data up here, look at it from a high level, and take it all the way down to that trooper has it? So they understand where those clusters of crashes are occurring. And where those clusters of crashes, that they're organizing their patrol schedule or their areas around that. The sergeant can do the hours, but the trooper can do the where. And so data matters. And since one of the things about this we show, because we are tracking from 20 to 2013 and the numbers along those things, and I think one of I wanted to just show you in terms of a dashboard, because these things are important to know. Yeah, certainly alcohol is up there as the number 1 and has been. I think it's roughly 30%. We can always count 30% in Texas and national that their drugs or alcohol. There's other numbers up there too. And it's really hard to get your handle on what this intoxication is. Distracted driving. And how many people confess, yeah, I was texting, I was reading at the same time when I was driving. I show this because some of these numbers are right here, are more reflective of what we had recently. Texas we're right there behind South Dakota. And certainly if you compare some states, we've talked about that. Teen-involved crashes is important to track that. And we recognize it. When we see that green, that's not good. That we've increased the number of teen driver-involved crashes. This is the alcohol fatalities in Texas for 2014, thus far, calendar year. And we used to call that, in the FBI, we used to call that a clue. Okay? Right? And here's a bigger clue. Okay? Those are fatalities. And I go back to data because there's no reason you can't take that data from the crash records, overlay it on a geospatial platform, and identify where the biggest threat areas are. And when you start doing it, and you take just the DWI crash in 2014, and when you start doing it, you can narrow down, you can drill all the way down and look at the crashes in the area and focus the areas where you need to be doing these patrols. And if you see clusters around an establishment, okay, a bar, a clue, or if it happens to be, it just happens every Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, okay, for some reason, around Texas A&M, okay, you see clusters of crashes, that might be a clue that you want to align resources with it. An important part of that is, we did throw Texas A&M in here. I guess I knew the general was going to be talking today. There's a few fatalities right there. Yep. The other part, in terms of driving statistics, in terms of statewide crash analysis, and this is for our at the very highest level, in looking at, okay, where are we missing something in the state? So when you apply that, and you apply an algorithm, which is a fancy term just to narrow down certain areas, Highway 21 in Texas, you can see what's going on there. And so I can ask, Chief Gonzalez, hey, Chief, even I'm smart enough, I can say, hey, that's red, that's not good. What's going on, Chief? What's happening now? And we can break it further down and recognize the crash segments and 3-mile crash segments and find out what's going on there, and how many of those, and what has been the causation of those factors along those lines. And that's one of the advantages of having that data, because with data, it empowers, and not just empowers us to use our resources better, but to integrate operations. The one thing you got to love about the military, or you got to love everything about the military, right? But one of the many things you can learn is unified command. And anybody that's involved in the law enforcement environment understands every sheriff is king or queen, and every chief is king or queen. But at the end of the day, there's the boundaries, you can't control boundaries. As Art Acevedo told me one time, he said, hey, accidents, drunks in the city go out and crash in the country. And drunks in the country go out and crash in the city. So we have to integrate operations, look at how we can complement times of troopers versus patrol officers. There's the city of Austin. And this is just, looking at from starting at a high level but going down. Okay, who's in charge? When you see all these accidents, this high threat area right here, that's 71. That goes out Dakota, and it goes right, it intersects right to the airport. Now, the gray area is the city of Austin limits. So which one does a trooper patrol? Which one does a patrol officer patrol? So there's that confusion in there, that area, in terms of that no man's land. Well, we need to know that. We need to have visibility on that, and we need to design operations and hold people accountable for impacting that. I had something I was going to show, but I think, Scott did a better job of it. And that's, we were looking at, from DPS standpoint, the state standpoint, what can we do with distracted teen driving? And I say that because at the end of the day, that is where we see the threat a year and 2 years from now. The generation of not talking but texting. It's nearly child abuse if you take that phone away, okay? Certainly neglect, right? Am I right? And in the terms, PLOS, you know what that is? Okay, or about parent looking over shoulder, okay? There's a number of terms out there that they do. But I don't care if it's just, 4 letters or 5. Well, they look down and type on that. Their eyes are on the road. And they say, I'm going to default to the engineers, that you can drive at 55 miles an hour. You can go a football field. Type in those 5 letters. A football field. Can you imagine closing your eyes and driving the length of a football field? Who would knowingly do that? Now, I realize that there's nobody in here that's ever texted before and driving, thank God. Okay? All right? But it's compelling. It's there, it's now. And of course, with our partners, one of the things that we're working with in the legislatures is there's nothing like plagiarizing something that works. And California Highway Patrol was working with Dr. Kelly Brown and worked on a teen impact series program, because getting to teens, the cultural part of it, you need Scott's stories. Scott speaks to teenagers, okay? PowerPoints don't. I don't, okay? Kids do. And frankly, California does a pretty good job of Hollywood productions that speaks to it and does it in a way that you can try to address the cultural aspect of it, where they themselves, police themselves. We're not there yet. We've got a long ways to go. But until we get there, clearly, there's going to be a number of challenges that we have to do. And we're not afraid, and we're planned and prepared to teach this in elementary school. And why would we do that? Are they going to give them their learner's permit when they're 6, 7? We're pretty advanced here in Texas. We're not that advanced, okay? We're not going to do it. But the bottom line is that what do middle school kids, if they were taught about the evils of texting and driving, and if you can get to them from a cultural standpoint, that's going to help them when they turn 15 and 16, right? 17. But what are they going to do between then? Are they going to say something to their parents when mom and dad text and drive? I think so. I mean, none of my kids are always looking for a reason to beat me up, okay? And there's, anything we can do, because again, even one life is worth it. So it's worth it, but it goes back to meaningful program, and we're going to leverage the fact that we offer and delegate skills testing to driving schools under one condition: they teach that program. And that's it. That concludes my time.